Today we're going to dig into a really counterintuitive idea. When you're trying to remember one of the worst things that ever happened in history, what if the most powerful way to do that is to choose to look away?
I mean, this is a question that's haunted writers and artists for, almost a century now. When you're faced with something so huge, so awful, that it just breaks language, like the Holocaust, how do you even begin to make art about it? How do you do it without, making it smaller, taming it, making it seem manageable?
So, what if the most powerful way to actually bear witness is to make a conscious choice not to show it directly? It sounds crazy, right? But that exact paradox is what defines the work of one of the world's most important writers on the Holocaust.
His name is Aharon Appelfeld. He was an incredible Israeli novelist. And he was a survivor of the Holocaust himself, so he dedicated his entire life's work to this subject. But here's the thing. He made a really radical, very deliberate choice about what his fiction would show you, and more importantly, what it wouldn't.
So what's so striking is that all the things you typically think of, the images we all associate with the Holocaust, they're just gone from his novels. The transports, the camps, the Nazi death squads known as the Einsatzgruppen, basically this whole, quote, concentrationary universe. Appelfeld just doesn't write about those scenes directly. They're just absent.
Instead, what he does is focus on the moments before and after. He writes about that creeping sense of dread, the uneasy feeling in the air in the years leading up to it all, and he writes about the shattered lives of the survivors afterwards, trying to put the pieces back together. It's like he circles this huge, dark void, but he almost never steps inside. So what's going on here, and why is it so incredibly powerful?
Well, the answer isn't really in what happens in his books. It's not in the plot. It's in the feel of his writing, in his totally unique, almost minimalist style. The key to figuring this all out is in how he tells his stories.
Appelfeld himself said his art was about contemplation, about creating these wordless reflections, this feeling of stillness that just kind of seeps into you without forcing anything. His writing is just so lyrical and quiet, poetic. It doesn't scream the horror in your face. Instead, it kind of whispers about the human lives, the ones being lived in the quiet moments between all the screaming.
Actually, his whole method is built around this one Hebrew concept, hitbonenut, and it's all about observation, reflection, this really deep meditative contemplation. His books don't try to explain anything to you, they just watch. They pay close attention. Which, brings us right back to the big question, why? Why would this quiet, thoughtful way of looking be the right way to tackle this subject? Okay, so here's where we get the big breakthrough in understanding what he's doing. A literary scholar named Emily Miller-Boudique came up with a fantastic theory, and she actually borrowed an idea from the philosopher Stanley Cavell to really unlock Appelfeld's genius. And here it is, the core idea that just solves this whole puzzle. Appelfeld's fiction isn't trying to make us know the Holocaust. Not like it's a bunch of facts you can memorize for a test. No, instead, it's asking us to do something different, something much more profound. It's asking us to acknowledge it.
And that difference between knowing and acknowledging, it's absolutely crucial. See, knowing is all about certainty, about mastering facts and getting proof. But acknowledging, well, that's about offering your attention, respectfully. It's about responding to the reality of someone else's suffering, especially when you can never fully understand it yourself. It's really a gesture of respect for what remains unknown. And that, right there, is the source of all its power. Because Appelfeld refuses to pretend that he can explain something that is, by its very nature, inexplicable. His writing shows this deep respect for the limits of our own understanding. Its incredible artistic and moral force comes not from showing us everything, but from honoring the things that can never, ever be fully shown.
So, okay, what does this whole approach of acknowledgement really accomplish? Why is it so ethically important? Maybe even more important than a book that just shows you all the graphic details.
For Appelfeld, the answer was something deeply, profoundly human. His goal was to rescue the individual from that crushing weight of huge numbers, of awful statistics. You see, the Nazis tried to reduce people to numbers. Appelfeld's art does the opposite. It's an act of restoration. By focusing on one single, specific life, with all its quirks and details, he gives that person back their human form. It sounds so simple, right? Restoring the name. But it's this incredibly revolutionary act of moral attention. Think about it. In a catastrophe that was all about anonymity and mass murder, the act of focusing on just one person, of restoring their name and their face, well, that pushes back against the entire logic of the genocide itself.
So what we end up with here is a really powerful new way of thinking about how art can, and maybe even how it should, confront these massive historical traumas.
So at the end of the day, the goal of his art isn't just to represent what happened, to be a documentary. It's to create this quiet, contemplative space for us, for the readers, a space where we can take part in an act of reverence and remembrance. It's an invitation, really, not just to see, but to feel and to reflect.
And this idea connects so beautifully to the work of the philosopher Emmanuel Levinas. He argued that all of ethics, it all begins in that moment you encounter the face of another person. For Levinas, a proper name, it's not just a label. It stands for a unique face, a whole unique life. And by focusing on the individual, on the proper name, Appelfeld gives us a way to talk about the unspeakable, but to do it without making it feel small or trivial.
So ultimately, the art of Aharon Appelfeld leaves us wrestling with this really powerful question. What he teaches us is that sometimes the most faithful, the most honest way to remember isn't to just stare unflinching directly into the abyss. Maybe it's to quietly, respectfully contemplate the human lives that were lived in the shadows all around it.